Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get the ceremony started. Congressman, if you'd like to come up, please. Thank you very much. If you'll all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You could be seated. Well, good evening and welcome to Sherwood Island State Park and Connecticut's site of its living memorial to 9/11. My name is Brian Mattiello, and I'm the former director of the 9/11 Office of Family Support. It's once again my honor and privilege to serve as MC this evening and to offer warm greetings on behalf of the Governor, Lieutenant Governor. Welcome, one and all. We're also joined by some dignitaries seated with the Governor and Lieutenant Governor tonight, and I welcome them here this evening. This year, by any measure, has been extraordinary, and it's not over. I suppose many of us, if we had the option of fast-forwarding 2020, we would, but perhaps only upon the guarantee that we wouldn't grow a year older in our lives, right? So, Governor, there ought to be a law. Maybe that's something to consider. So much lately has taken us off our routines. So much has challenged us on a daily basis, and so much has really impacted the humanity around us, and it's been a lot to bear. And yet, this 9/11 anniversary has come to us just the same, just as it does with each passing year, this time with 19 years having elapsed. Not surprisingly, we have fewer gathered here this evening, but I think we all know that the larger community of people who are connected by this event are here in spirit. This anniversary conjures up in all of our minds images and feelings and memories and inspires us all to a reflection point. Certainly anyone who experienced 9/11, but most especially the families who lost a loved one. I want to commence this ceremony with a reminder of why we gather. One is to remember who and what we lost. Two, to take stock in who we've become since. And three, to remind ourselves of the responsibility we carry forward to live our lives well and to the fullest. And I also want to commence this ceremony with this additional thought. Free yourselves of the lesson of 9/11, that because all things in this world are temporary, people are what matter most. So much of what interests us day to day will live beyond us, beyond our time on earth. But people continue on. The impressions we make on each other are lasting, and we all leave some legacy behind, just as our loved ones left behind. And how they have shaped each of our lives, and how the impressions we make on each other, either each time we gather, how that shapes us. People are what matter most. We are never really finished with grief. We know that. It's part of the fabric of living, and it seems to be that grief is always waiting around the corner. But 19 years out, what matters most is that the loved ones that we lost, that they were in our life, and that their legacy and their impressions live on in us, and we in turn pass it on to others. Yes, all things in life are temporary, but people are what matter most, however long they were in our lives. With that spirit in mind, I have two recognitions that I must state up front. First, two family members, Brad Bullis and Chris Vadas, must be called out for their service in helping bring this service together. Their leadership on behalf of the family members is deserving of praise. Brad and Chris, on behalf of the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, thank you. I know you're around here somewhere. The second recognition Brad and Chris were preceded by Paul Kerwin, the family member who essentially was the driving force behind this ceremony for many years. We lost Paul just a short time ago. His path in life drew to an end, and I miss him. His family misses him, and the world misses him. From him, I learned that clear and measured voices are hard to find. He had one. From him, I learned that there are many ways to exhibit strength, but the truest measure is the conviction that causes you to act. Paul had conviction. From him, I learned that even though one can suffer tragedy, you must never lose interest in looking out at the horizon. And Paul did that. I will always remember Paul as a person who played his part well, who discerned a path in life that was worthy. May he rest knowing that he raised up a bit of goodness in this world and the way he lived his life, and that the greatest epitaph ever written can be placed to his credit, that the world is better for his having lived. With that, let us officially commence this service, and for the opening prayer, I call upon Cantor Harriet Dunkerley for the invocation. Cantor.
Good evening. I offer the following prayer that was written by Allison Patton, who was meant to be here to deliver it, and at the last minute was unable to be with us. She writes, "This evening we pause to remember, to grieve, to name, to honor, to reflect. In the silence, we lift our hearts to the source of life and love. Sit with us, we pray. Where there are tears, weep with us. Where there is loneliness, befriend us. Where there is unresolved grief, comfort us. Where the seeds of hope and healing are taking root among us, water them. Here in our midst, cultivate visions of peace. Nurture in us strength, creativity, and grace so that we might banish fear and pursue that vision in honor of all those whom we remember today. We ask this in your many names. Amen.
It is now my honor to call upon Connecticut's Governor, Ned Lamont, to offer personal reflections on behalf of the people of the state of Connecticut. Governor.
Well, Brian, thank you for those magical words. You said that this is a year that we're never going to forget, and 9/11 is a day that we'll never forget and should never forget. I was in Manhattan on 9/11, and I was at a Danbury hospital that day in March when we had our first COVID infection of Connecticut. You know, obviously 9/11 for me was a bolt out of the blue, a shock that cut right to the quick. COVID was a little different. You know, we saw something over in Wuhan, and then maybe Seattle, and then New Rochelle, and then it was here. And we remember the friends and family that are no longer with us from 9/11, and the friends and family that are no longer with us, given what happened over the last many months. I also like to remember, the good things. And I remember 9/11, the extraordinary heroism of the police and fire and the first responders, and a new powerful meaning for that. And look forward to hearing about Christopher Blackwell a little bit later. And we had a different type of first responder during COVID. We called them essential workers, but they were heroes just the same. They didn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes they did. Maybe it was a nurse's uniform, or doctor, or daycare operator, or food service provider, and folks who just stood up every day and, not knowing what was out there with that invisible enemy, did what they had to do. And I just say, out of all the tragedy from these two unforgettable times in our lives, it's also worth remembering that it's times like that, I think, that brings out the best of Americans. It was a period of time after 9/11 when we were united, like we hadn't been united in many, many years. And it was a good feeling that we were together towards that cause. And I think, given COVID, there was a sense of unity as well. And it was more complicated. We couldn't see this enemy, but we knew that each and every one of us, wearing the mask, were wearing that on behalf of somebody else. And I also just like to remember, as you said, Brian, just the people who live with us every day. It's worth remembering who they are. I think maybe this is some family here, and I think you'll see, here we are, 19 years later, we all want to come back and remember them, just like you'll help us remember. God bless you all.
And now a word from Connecticut's Lieutenant Governor. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Susan Bysiewicz.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening, everyone. I'm so honored to join all of you for this very solemn remembrance. I want to thank Brad Bullis, Jim Sorensen, all the hard workers at the Department of Administrative Services and the Department of Environmental Protection, and everyone who helped us organize today's ceremony. I'll never forget that bright sunny morning 19 years ago when nearly 3,000 lives were taken from us, so tragically, so cruelly. Mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, friends, co-workers, colleagues. In seconds, minutes, hours, and days that followed, it was a very dark time in our country's history. And we had the opportunity, though, in that very dark moment, to witness some very courageous acts that reminded us how resilient our state and our country can be. And our first responders heroically put themselves in harm's way to save others. Ordinary people risked their lives to save strangers in the Twin Towers. A 58-year-old Greenwich resident, Bennett Fisher, was on the 44th floor of the World Trade Center, and he sacrificed helping others get out safely. A 36-year-old Darien resident, Christopher Gardner, was on the 78th floor of the World Trade Center trying to escape in the aftermath of September 11th, and he was able to get out of the building but returned to help others and died as a result. A family friend of mine and a Middlefield resident, Bruce Eagleson, sacrificed his life to save others. Bruce was the vice president of security at the Westfield Group at the World Trade Center. And as the attacks unfolded, Bruce went in many times and saved 10 of his employees before the building collapsed and he was killed. There are so many stories like this, and while we continue to grieve and remember and think about the 3,000 lives lost, it's important to remember that there are others who live on and live the legacies of those who were lost. Some of those who experienced 9/11 as children grew up to pursue careers in social work and law enforcement, education, public service. Some went into the military. One of my friend Bruce's Eagleson's sons, Timothy, became a United States Army officer and ultimately received the rank of captain in the Army's 244th Air Defense Artillery Regiment in Iraq. His decision to join the Army to go to the Middle East was the direct result of the 9/11 tragedy. Thank you, Timothy, for your service. You honor your dad. Some people went into a field of work that the person they lost was in. Others became firefighters or police officers, following in the footsteps of fallen 9/11 first responders. Last year, the New York City Fire Department graduated a class of 301 firefighters. Of that class, 13 children of men who died in the line of duty graduated and became firefighters. As we remember and pay tribute to all of those who we lost, we say thank you to all of the dedicated individuals who responded as rescue workers, many of whom sacrificed their own lives to save others. And so this year I want to pay a special tribute to 2 more Connecticut heroes who, in the face of darkness, worked with search and rescue teams, reuniting families with their loved ones. In 2018, State Trooper Walter Green died of cancer contracted as a result of his service in the aftermath of 9/11. He was part of a canine unit that went to New York to assist in search and rescue operations. In May of this year, Connecticut State Police Trooper First Class Eugene Kenneth Barron Jr. passed away following a courageous battle of cancer that he contracted as a result of his response and service in support of New York City in the aftermath of the collapse of the Twin Towers. Trooper Barron, along with other members of the Traffic Services Unit of the Connecticut State Police, responded to the Trade Center immediately following the attacks to search for survivors and to help the families who were looking for their loved ones. In the aftermath of these attacks, the feeling of patriotic duty grew stronger as we came together. We were united and we supported one another, because that's what the people of Connecticut do in the face of challenge, disaster, and catastrophe. And we see it now as we are coping with COVID. And there are some special lessons in this COVID-19 pandemic, but we know that we're stronger together and that we will come out unified, resilient, and strong. And so we say to all of those who've lost loved ones who came today, and those who aren't here, we're thinking of you too. Our prayers are with you. We will never forget your loved ones or their contributions. And we know that those of us who are left in our state and in our country continue to honor their legacies every day. And so God bless each of you, our beautiful state, and our great country. Thank you so much.
Thank Thank you to both of you. We will now have a reading of the names to remember the uniqueness of every individual life lost on 9/11. To lead this portion of the ceremony, I call upon Jim Sorensen and Deanna Leah, with whom I've had the pleasure of serving alongside as part of the 9/11 Office of Family Support. Deanna and Jim.
I'm Deanna Leah, and it is my privilege to introduce the readers of the lost loved ones. Alexandra Blackwell, daughter of Christopher J. Blackwell, New York Fire Department. Kieran Lyons, brother of Michael J. Lyons. Elizabeth Bullis Weiss, sister of Diane Snyder. Christopher Waters, brother of James Thomas Waters, Jr.
Lawrence Abel, Trooper First Class Eugene Kenneth Barron, Jr., Connecticut State Police. Brian C. Bennett. Jeffrey D. Bittner. My dad, New York City firefighter Christopher J. Blackwell, Rescue 3. Alan Patrick Boyle. Alexander Berginski. Francis Henry Frank Brennan. Thomas M. Brennan. Timothy M. Burns. Joseph M. Calindro. Edward Calderon. Sandra Campbell. Alejandro Castano. Juan Ceballos.
Stephen P. Cherry. Kevin Francis Cleary. Jeffrey W. Cloud. Keith Eugene Coleman. Scott Thomas Coleman. Margaret Connor. Kevin P. Connors. Joseph John Copo. Dolores Costa. Brian Thomas Cummins. Paul Curioli. Patrick Dennehy. Anthony Demas.
Lieutenant Kevin Donnelly, FDNY. John Bruce Eagleson. Michael Egan. Ulf Ram Erickson. Eric B. Evans. Wendy R. Faulkner. Edward T. Fergus, Jr. Bradley Fetchett. Paul M. Fiore. John Fiorito. Bennett Lawson Fisher. Peter C. Fry. Richard Peter Gabriel, Sr.
Richard S. Gabriel. James A. Gadil. Thomas E. Galvin. Osini Mama Garba. Christopher Samuel Gardner. Peter Allen Gay. Peter Gerard Galinas. Robert Gerlich. Lawrence Getzfred. Evan Hunter Gillette. Ronald Gilligan. Stephen Lawrence Glick. Wilder A. Gomez.
Kiran Kumar Reddy Gopu. Edwin J. Graff III. Donald Green. Trooper Walter Green, Jr., Connecticut State Police, James A. Greenleaf, Jr., Pedro Grehan, James D. Halverson, Sean S. Hanley, Christine Lee Hansen, Peter Burton Hansen, Sue Kim Hansen, Timothy John Hargrave, Michael Heidenberger, H. Joseph Heller.
John Henwood, Robert Higley II, James J. Hoban, Judith Florence Hoffmiller, Paul R. Hughes, William Christopher Hunt, Thomas Edward Hines, John F. Ishken, Ariel Lewis Jacobs, and Michael Grady Jacobs.
Mark Stephen Jardam, Robert Thomas Jordan, Richard M. Keene, Peter R. Kellerman, Maurice Patrick Kelly, William Hill Kelly Jr., Amy King, Glenn Davis Kerwin, Stephen LaMancha, Gary E. Lasco.
Robert A. Lawrence, Jr., Joseph A. Lenahan, Adam J. Lewis, Stephen B. Lilienthal, Gary W. Lozier, my brother Michael J. Lyons, FDNY, Squad 41, Edward Teddy F. Maloney, Ada Mason, Kevin Michael McCarthy, Juliana McCourt, Ruth McCourt, Eamon McEnany, Michael G. McGinty, Francis McGuinn, William J. Meehan, Jr., Eskadar Malaku.
Raymond Joseph Metz III, Joel Miller, Michael M. Miller, Cheryl Ann Monyak, Lindsay S. Morehouse, Jude Musa, Cesar A. Murillo, Christopher William White Murphy, Daniel Robert Nolan, Robert W. Noonan, Timothy M. O'Brien, Scott J. O'Brien, James Andrew O'Grady, Christopher Orgilowitz,
Margaret Quinn Orlosk, Thomas Anthony Palazzo, James Matthew Patrick, Mike A. Pelletier, Joshua Piver, Roger Mark Rasweiler, Jean DeStrahan Roger, Sean P. Rooney, Michael C. Rothberg, Jason E. Sabag, Jesus Sanchez, Stacy Leigh Sanders, Sean Schilke, John B. Swartz, Randy Scott, Barbara A. Shaw, Michael John Simon, Heather Lee Smith, and Diane Bullis Snyder, my sister.
Gregory T. Spagnoletti, George E. Spencer III, Derek J. Stakevicius, Craig William Staub, Andrew Stergiopoulos, Madeline Sweeney, Michael C. Teru, Thomas F. Thurkoff, Jr., Eric Raymond Thorpe, Amy E. Toyen, Tyler Ugolan, Jonathan J. Human, Alan V. Upton.
Bradley H. Vadas, Edward Raymond Vanacore, Frederick Verici, my brother, James Thomas Waters, Jr., Jeffrey David Weiner, Candace Lee Williams, John P. Williamson, William Eben Wilson, David H. Winton, Christopher W. Wodenchek, Martin Phillips Wolforth, John Works, Edward P. York, Charles A. Zion.
Let us all stand together in a moment of silence, a moment of reflection and respect. You may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move to the benediction. The cantor will come up again, and those will be the final words spoken in this ceremony. Following her words, the governor and lieutenant governor will join you out at the memorial. But please stay in your seats until directed, okay? Cantor?
I sat down in the middle of the garden and leaned my back against a warm yellow pumpkin. The earth was warm under me, and warm as I crumbled it through my fingers. I kept as still as I could. Nothing happened. I did not expect anything to happen. I was something that lay under the sun and felt it, like the pumpkins. And I did not want to be anything more. I was entirely happy. Perhaps we feel like that when we die and become a part of something entire, whether it is sun and air or goodness and knowledge. At any rate, that is happiness, to be dissolved into something complete and great. When it comes to one, it comes as naturally as sleep. Blessed is the life force within each of us, even in the worst of times. Like dew on the grass, it renews and restores. El Male Rachamim, God full of compassion, we pray, may courage come. Let dark fears be gone with morning's light. Let grief give way to confidence and to new hope. Help us to remember our loved ones live on in us. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of the sun, we remember them. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year, and when the year ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, when we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. Baruch atah Adonai Mekor HaChayim. Blessed are you, Holy One, who gives and renews life. May the memories of all those we have loved and lost continue to bless us with renewed purpose and zest for a full and meaningful life. As together we say, Amen.